I'm Luke. I'm one of the board members of a group called the Lions of Liberty. I also sit on the board of AZRA, our local chapter of AZRA, which is Arizona Republican Assembly. Special thanks to them. We have the entire AZRA board is what put this together. We've been working for the last number of weeks. We've spent a lot of our own money out of our own pockets to do this. So we want to give a very special thanks to them, and then to the AZRA/Lions of Liberty Vetting Committee, which is the other group that put this together. We did all the questions, put all the stuff together. So we're going to give them a quick round of applause if we can. Couple of big sponsors for tonight: Grassroots 50, Prickly Pear News, of course, the Lions of Liberty. Sound Bros Productions is the production company that put all this together, did all the sound and lights and video and live stream. We're live streaming to 3 different live stream sources, 2 Facebook sources. Andy Powell's site is being live streamed. He's here with the Purpose Project, and then straight to his live stream. Sound Bros Productions live stream is up. So if you have anybody that's not here, you can tell them to search on Facebook. It'll come up. There's 2 different lives on that. And then we are live to Grassroots 50 on their YouTube channel. If I could have all the current elected representatives and candidates, if you could stand to be recognized, please give us a round of applause. If you want to know anything about these folks. Okay, now sit down. If you want to know anything about these folks, they've got tables outside. You can talk to any one of them and get that started. I don't think we have anything else. This is going to be a straight through shot. We don't have any plans for intermission. So if you need to get up and go to the bathroom, just get up and go to the bathroom. The bathroom's right there in the back corner. The folks selling the stuff are going to be there all night. So if you need a drink or whatever, we will have that. I would like to introduce our moderator for the evening. Ladies and gentlemen, Ray Michaels of Grassroots 50. Where'd I have this written down? It says here, the coolest guy ever. Does that work? That works. Ray is an accomplished, he's been in politics. We met, I don't remember where we met, but it was something political. He's part of the Arizona GOP, does a number of things. He's the chair of LD8 down in Maricopa County. There's a whole pile of different things I could say about Ray. We called Ray in because Ray is from outside of Yavapai County. So he is completely 100% in the middle. He has no sides. Whereas I can look around, I can see a bunch of pins and buttons and signs for each different candidate because we all live here. Ray is outside of that, so that's why we picked him. And from this point on, it's Ray's show. If you disrupt, if you break his rules, the Arizona Rangers are here. They'll be glad to take you out. If they don't want to take you out, I'll be glad to. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry, had to go there. One more thing on, mark your calendars down, Monday, July 1st at 6 p.m. at the Alliance Bible Church in Prescott. They're going to be showing Letter to the American Church by Eric Metaxas. It's a great video. If you haven't seen that, you need to see it. Bring people out to see it. It's a good video. And from here on out, sorry, I completely forgot. I mentioned them, but I didn't even thank them. Thank you to the Arizona Rangers. This is the Lonesome Valley chapter. If you would like to donate to them, they're always taking donations. Just find one of them, and they'll direct you that direction. All right, Ray, your show.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming tonight. We welcome everybody on the live stream. This is the last man standing. All right, so I would like to introduce the candidates for you right now. I'm used to standing up, but I think the camera's only set for me to be seated here. We have 3 candidates tonight. The first one is Ken Bennett. He's the Arizona State Senator in District 1. Ken is a successful businessman and financial professional with a long history of public service in Arizona. Ken has served as an executive and on boards of directors of several companies, including 10 years with Cancer Treatment Centers of America in Goodyear. Ken was Arizona's 19th Secretary of State from 2009 to 2015. He and his wife Janine have 3 children and 4 grandchildren. He is an Eagle Scout and has an accounting degree from ASU. He currently serves again in the Arizona State Senate, where he's chair of the Education Committee and Vice Chair of the Elections Committee. Please welcome to the stage Ken Bennett. Our second candidate, Mark Finchem. Mark Finchem has engaged in public service for most of his life, first as a law enforcement officer, paramedic in West Michigan for 21 years, then 8 years in the Arizona House of Representatives. He holds a bachelor's degree from Grand Canyon University in state, local public policy, graduating summa cum laude, and a master's degree in law and economics from Rogers Law School at the University of Arizona, graduating cum laude. Mr. Finchem, as a candidate for State Senate LD1, is endorsed by President Donald Trump, Michael Flynn, and former ICE Director Tom Holman. Please welcome to the stage Mark Finchem. Our final candidate, Steve Zipperman. Steve Zipperman is a constitutional conservative, an Army veteran, and a patriot. The oath Steve took to protect and defend our Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, is something that he takes very seriously. Steve is a retired small businessman. His extensive careers in business and law have given him strong skills in negotiation and a clear understanding of statutory language. Steve is uncompromising in his dedication to serving we the people, transparency in government, and to keeping our citizens free. Please welcome to the stage Steve Zipperman. This evening's questions will cover issues both in and outside of the purview of the candidate's elected office, as well as general questions and voters' concerns. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer a question. A candidate may or may not receive the same question. Any response calling out an opposing candidate by name, or if an opposing candidate's name is mentioned in a question specifically directed to a particular candidate, that candidate called out or mentioned will have 1.5 minutes to respond if they wish. Opposing candidates may respectfully raise a question or concern regarding another candidate's answer to a question. If initiated, that opposing candidate may have up to 1 minute to state their concern. Following the concern, the original answering candidate will have up to 1 minute to rebut the other candidate's concern. When the moderator calls time, the speaking candidate will have up to 10 seconds to complete their comment. Candidates were previously advised that they could submit up to 2 questions that may be asked as a general question or specific to another candidate during the debate without any guarantee of questions being asked. Questions asked during the debate will be in and from various sources, from available public information and general concerns by the voters. Topics may vary from economy, immigration, school, election integrity, border crisis, 2A, or any other topic. No question is considered off limits. At the end, each candidate shall make a 2-minute closing statement. Are there any questions to the rules? All right, this is a debate. We ask that each one of the candidates and the audience be very respectful to all of the candidates on the stage. There were quite a few questions that were here. We tried to put it together in a form that would be very informative for everyone and also entertaining for you tonight. Gentlemen, are you ready to begin? Mr. Finchem, it looks like you're taller than we had anticipated. All right, we're in round number 1. These are questions for all candidates. We will start with Mr. Bennett on the far left for the audience, on the far right, stage right. The governor has just released a $3 million Clean Arizona plan funded by the Biden Inflation Reduction Act and to be overseen by the governor's Office of Resilience. First question is 3 parts. What do you know about the Office of Resiliency? Do you advocate for the state to accept federal government dollars in exchange for political favors? And the third, do you believe that climate change is an existential threat to our existence? Time starts now.
Well, first of all, I am called Mr. Bennett many places, but I am just going to take the prerogative to say that I am the senator from this district, and I hope people will respect that. And I respect these 2 gentlemen to my left. Mark served in the House, and if we wanted to call him Representative Finchem, that'd be fine, but it's good. We got tape in there. To me, the Office of Resiliency is an unnecessary office that the governor has created to try to tie into the idea that global warming is caused entirely by humans and could somehow be solved by something that we could do. I think the Earth goes through cooling and warming phases. When I went to school in the 70s, we were told that we were on the verge of falling into an ice age. And now, 30, 40 years later, we're told that we're about to have terrible consequences because of warming. The Earth is going to go through those natural stages. I don't know much about her $3 million initiative. And as far as taking money from the federal government, there's a lot of rules and regulations imposed on the state, whether we take their money or not. The state budget this year, by the way, is about $23 billion. There's another $5 billion or so of local property tax that goes into education. But there's $42 billion of other monies, mostly federal. And so not taking those monies, one, would not alleviate us from the rules and regulations that come with them, but it is something that we deal with a lot. When people give money to other governments, they usually want to tell them what to do, and that's the last thing we should do, is what the federal government wants us to do.
All right, thank you so much. Mr. Finchem, would you prefer a Representative Finchem?
How about you just call me Mark?
Mark, all right, thank
All right.
you. Mark, same question. Would you like me to repeat it?
If you don't mind, please repeat the question.
All right. What do you know about the Office of Resiliency? Do you advocate for the state to accept federal dollars in exchange for political favors? And do you believe that climate change is an existential threat to our existence?
Okay, I'm going to try and cover that as quickly as I can, but I would remind you that the occupant of the 9th floor, who is there because of an irredeemably compromised election, she's under investigation for pay to play. That should set the stage for what she's intending to do. Office of Resiliency. Have you noticed that Democrats have a habit of labeling things some word salad topic, and you have no idea what it actually is supposed to do? Well, that's on purpose. They don't want you to know. So, do we think that climate change is an existential threat? Actually, they had to finally land on climate change because all the other descriptions didn't work. So if it were such a threat, why are 3 of the richest people in the world buying mega mansions on the seaboard? Barack Obama. Answer me that question. If it's such a threat, if we're going to be underwater, why does Al Gore, Barack Obama, Oprah, some of those... They're buying property that is literally feet from the ocean. These are the people who were the chief cheerleaders for the whole idea behind climate change. Now, as Senator Bennett has said, yeah, indeed, the climate does change. In fact, it changes from the morning until the evening and back in the morning. You all have experienced that, right? Yeah. So I do not believe that it is an existential threat to our existence. I remember Malcolm X. I grew up in that era. He said the greatest threat to the black man, and I would say to us all, is the white liberal who can't control their hands on other people's money. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And as a courtesy, would you prefer Mr. Zipperman or Steve or?
Steve is fine.
Steve is fine. All right. Steve, would you like me to repeat the question?
I think I heard it. I think I understand it. The Office of Resiliency is one of those left jokes. It really is. And I'm not a big believer in climate change. I think that this is something that was set up as a result of federal money angled in front of the state governor. I'm not willing to compromise our sovereignty as a state to the federal government. The last time we saw that happen, it was with COVID. They dangled money, and the next thing you knew, FEMA was planning us all to go into camps if we didn't comply. I don't like taking money from the federal government because there's always a price to pay later, and there are always strings involved. As far as I'm concerned, I would not take federal money, and I would vote against doing so. The climate change being an existential threat, I was a science major as an undergraduate. I'm familiar with the fact that the climate of this planet has been changing on a regular basis or irregular basis as long as this planet has been here. And it is not necessarily related to any of our activities or carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide. Climate change is a fact, but the fact that it's because of our conduct or because of us using fossil fuels is a joke. It isn't scientifically based, and the science that the left uses to prove it is bad science. So that's about all I have to say. The Office of Resiliency is not something that I would be in favor of supporting, and I wouldn't take the money from the feds in order to create that office.
All right, thank you so much. All right. Question number 2, we're going to start with Mark Finchem on this one. Depending on the source, approximately 50 to 55% of the state's budget goes directly to education for K to 12. Yet a majority of our students continue to fail and fall behind in grade level proficiencies. Administrators, teachers, and school board members get salary increases, yet student performance does not improve. As an elected official, what will you do to reverse this downward spiral in our education system? And what will you do to help our children get the education they need to succeed?
Expansion of the ESA program to every child. Backpack funding for every single child. When I was in the House of Representatives, I had occasion to talk to the minority leader, and I think they were in the minority for a very good reason. 51% of the state budget in that particular budget was dedicated to education. And I just offhandedly asked, what actually is the number? Because you keep telling us it's not enough. And she just openly said, we could use the entire state budget and it still wouldn't be enough. My response to that was, well, okay, but we have 30% of the kids that are graduating high school that can do math. That doesn't work for me. Well, you can't prove that. Actually, yes, I can. Marana spends less money per pupil and has a double the graduation rate, or at least at the time, of the city of Tucson, TUSD. TUSD got far more money to graduate children, and I'm going to say children, not young adults. They were graduating children of the mind because they couldn't read at anything better than a 45% level. They were below that in math. They were even below that further in science. So my solution to that is to make sure that every child has the opportunity to leave a failing school. That is the message that you send to the public school system to say, if you're not meeting my expectations, I will take my business elsewhere. Now, you will have the leftist, I got to be careful here, we'll say some of the more vocal teachers will tell you that that's absurd because we have unqualified people teaching. How about we check the SAT and ACT scores?
All right, thank you. All right, to Steve Zipperman. What will you do to reverse this downward spiral in our education system?
Well, I agree with Mark Finchem about the ESA program. I think it needs to be expanded, and there's a reason for that. Competition raises all boats, and capitalism is our economic system. As far as I'm concerned, more competition for the public schools. Public schools have never had to compete for money. They've never had to compete for students. They just sat there and they spent our money over and over and over again. And spending the money doesn't have any relationship with how well our kids are educated. The question asked, it asserts that between 50 and 55% of our budget here in Arizona goes to education, K through 12, and that's true. Proficiency, 21% in mathematics, 44% in English. As far as I'm concerned, those are failing scores. How in the world are our children supposed to compete in the world? For jobs, for positions at great universities, they can't compete. It's really bad. And there is no correlation between government spending on education and increases in scores. As far as I'm concerned, I would tie educators' salaries and school administrators' salaries to performance measures. If they do better and if the kids do better, then that's all it takes. Even though we have a capitalistic system economically, there are some things that just don't respond to money. And I think that our teachers and our schools can do a much better job. And if they can't, the parents should have the choice of taking their children to another location to get an education that where they will be able to increase their proficiency and be more capable of competing for jobs. Thank you.
Senator Bennett, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I think I have it. The best solution for poor performance in any system is competition, which is why I was glad to be a part of helping get charter schools started in Arizona in 1994, I think it was. I was on the State Board of Education when the charter school legislation was passed. I was asked to be one of two members of that board that also served on the State Charter School Board, and we considered the first group of about 300 applications to start the charter school network in Arizona. I think we approved about 250 of them, and now we have about 560 charter schools in Arizona. They educate about 235,000 students. It's the largest percentage of any state in America that allows students to go to a school of their parents' choice. In addition to that 235,000 or so, we have about 75,000 students in the Universal ESA program. I was also pleased to be there when we started the ESA program. When I was Senate President in 2003, 4, 5, and 6, part of the budget negotiation that we negotiated with none other than Janet Napolitano in 2005 was starting the first 4 categories of education scholarship accounts. We didn't call them that at the time, but that has grown into the ESA program. Just a couple of weeks ago, a woman told me about her daughter who was falling behind during the COVID years. She got an ESA scholarship and was going to a private school. Nothing was getting better. So she used a couple $100 to do a test on her daughter. They found out she had dyslexia. They changed course. The school made the changes necessary. She made up 3 years of academic progress in 7 months with school choice.
All right, thank you. Question number 3. Recently, the Yavapai College Board voted to increase property taxes by approximately 3.4% for Yavapai County citizens. As the Yavapai County College Board is not a legislative body having the same standing on the state level as the House and Senate representatives, should the Yavapai College Board have the ability to approve tax increases as they desire? And how should we, the people, hold the board accountable to the voters on tax increases? We're going to start with Steve Zipperman.
I was incensed when I heard that the Yavapai College Board had agreed to raise our property taxes by 3.4%. I believe they have a lot of money in the budget for that school. All they have to do is tighten their belt a little bit, rather than making us, sorry about that, but they're expecting us to make up the difference. They are elected, which is good, but there's no oversight, and that's the problem. I think the legislature needs to create an oversight group of one sort or another in order to be able to make sure that those increases are reasonable, because it's so long before we get a chance to vote those people that increased our taxes out. It's a long term. So I think that before the money actually gets charged to us for a tax increase, that somebody needs to make sure that it's a reasonable and legitimate increase. And I don't think that right now, I don't think that that's happening at all. I'm very unhappy with the increase. I don't think that we're going to get our money's worth out of it. And the question is, why do they need that 3.4% increase? I don't see it. So I'm against them being able to raise our taxes without checks and balances. In the state, that's what we have. We have the House, we have the Senate, and we have a governor that will veto everything anyhow. Or the people who will vote things in as a ballot initiative or proposition. So there are ways to deal with this, but government typically needs checks and balances because our founding fathers knew that nobody could be trusted. Human nature is bad. And so they created a government where somebody is always watching someone else who's spending the money. I think that's a good system.
All right, thank you. Next, Senator Bennett.
To say that the Yavapai College Governing Board is not a legislative body, I believe is, with all due respect, inappropriate. They are elected by the people of this community college district, just like city council members are elected, county boards of supervisors. So they are a legislative body. The founders gave us a republic, not a democracy. They gave us a constitutional republic where the people get to elect representatives in different responsibilities. So we get to elect 5 county supervisors. In Prescott, 6 council members and a mayor, and on and on. So I think they are a legislative body. A state law and the Arizona Constitution gives them property taxing authority. When they exercise that authority and make decisions that the majority of the people don't like, our opportunity is to change the board members. I think one of the board members is in this room tonight. Where's Chris? There he is, somewhere. I can't see him. So I know most of the members on that board. 4 voted for the increase. Chris, 1, voted against it. If they continue to abuse that in the minds of the majority of the people, then we get to elect different members of that governing board. But they have the constitutional authority to make that decision, and they did so. But we, as the people, have to keep eyes on every level of government. And I'm not a big fan of assigning other levels of government to watch over other levels of government, because then it just gets to be a spiral of taking power away from the people. So we need to do our job and elect people to these boards, commissions, boards of supervisors, city councils that will do what we want them to do, not what they think should be done.
All right, thank you. Mark?
So I believe that local control is the best control. And it doesn't get any more local than the people having oversight. Now I'm going to unpack that a little bit. I think we have a problem with taxation in this state. We got some of it right, but I think we've got some of it wrong. I think that from my estimation, the proposed tax, which I guess now has been voted in by the Yavapai College, that's an example of using other people's money without responsibility. Have you heard anything accountability-wise as to where that money is going to go specifically? And furthermore, What is the actual need? Is it a dozen people? Is it 300 people? Is it a particular topic? I would like to know specifically, where is that money going to go? Every one of you ought to have a say in those local expenditure limits. That means, in my view, that when you're going to have, this sounds a lot like a school override to me. Don't the people have a say in how they're going to be taxed? Yes, we are a republic. And yes, the Yavapai board is a legislative board, but they're there for policy. Are they there exclusively for appropriation of your tax money? I question that notion. I mean, it's similar, quite frankly. Did you know that federal money that comes in, federal taxpayer dollars that come in, go directly to the governor's office? They don't go through the state appropriation process? Did you know that? I bet you didn't. This is called a money chamber, and I don't like it. Even though, yes, it's local control, I think that the people should have a voice in any property tax increase because that makes you in perpetuity a renter. Thank you.
All right, this is the last question in round number 1. Many Arizonans express serious concern regarding mining and agricultural rights. Recently in Prescott, there was a town hall over the apparent illegal and inappropriate mining activities, in particular the Gold Paradise Peak Mine, a mining company with direct ties to the CCP. How do you intend on addressing the issue of foreign enemies from owning land in Yavapai County, Arizona, and exporting our precious minerals and possibly used this in technologies and weaponry against our nation? We'll start off with Senator Bennett.
I oppose allowing foreign countries, especially those who are our enemies like China, to own land through Chinese corporations and to be exporting gold or silver, any precious resource that we have here in the U.S. Now, the laws right now have allowed for the predecessor owners of that company, sold it to this group. I support, in some conversations that I've had with the Attorney General's office, I support making sure that they comply with every detail of every law, rule, and regulation that we can require them to do so. And if we can prevent them from exporting any of our precious materials or minerals, I think we should adopt laws. We tried to this year, but it was vetoed. We need to make sure that the enemies of America and Arizona are not owning property here and taking our minerals and rights away from here.
All right, thank you. Mark Finchem.
Arizona is a mining state. In fact, if you don't grow it, you got to mine it. Have you ever heard that? No, it could not be any more true. Everything in this room has been mined. Everything in this room has been mined. From the chair you're sitting in, to the floor you're standing on, to the roof over your head. It wasn't grown. Now, we also have the good nature or good fortune to be able to grow most of our food. But, you know, the recent Senator Mine issue, I think, raises a very good question. Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders reversed the sale of property in her state to a CCP organization. Probably because some wise legislators made it so that she could do that. Now, I believe she had a hand in the executive order to make it happen, but I would support legislation that prohibits such a practice. We already have in the U.S. Constitution and within our own state law a prohibition on selling private land back to the federal government. You can't do it without the legislature granting its approval. Well, think about that for a moment. If we're going to sell land to a foreign government, why wouldn't the legislature have a hand in approving that? So do we need legislation? I think that we'd have to do a look at jurisprudence and see if there's a way for us to stop it with what's already there. Because I guarantee you, the occupant of the 9th floor by the last name of Hobbs is not going to sign anything that will restrict a communist or a Marxist government from intruding into the United States. Hard stop. As for the question of mining and regulation, mines can be run safely. And I think that that was the point of the town hall about the Senator mine. It was not being run safely. That's why it was being shut down by the state. And I support that action. If they clean up their act, I'll stop there.
All right, Steve Zipperman.
Arkansas was able to reverse the sale of land to the Chinese because of one thing. It was agricultural land, it was not mining. The same thing is true of South Dakota. The governor in South Dakota just signed into law the inability of the Chinese government, through their representatives, being able to purchase land for the purpose of agriculture. I propose that a continuing resolution, since we're not going to get bills signed by the governor, she's the veto queen, what we need to do is put it to the people. And the continuing resolutions, if they pass the House and the Senate, they don't need the signature of the governor. They need your approval. So I see two continuing resolutions coming out of this. The first one being on agriculture products. It's a big problem down near Phoenix because alfalfa sucks up all of our water, and then they cut it down, put it on a ship, and send it out to other countries. That's not cool. We don't have enough water in this state. So that's one. And the second one is mining. We need a comparable law put to the people regarding whether or not our mining properties, whether or not a foreign government should be able to buy them. And I don't think that's appropriate either. I have another solution too. I would like to see a bonding requirement for mines, a large bond. Why? Because the Chinese government has a habit throughout the United States of buying property, mining it, strip mining it, making it ugly, and then declaring bankruptcy, walking away with all the money that they made from that venture because they send it all back to China. And the American taxpayer gets stuck holding the balance. If you require them to have a substantial bond that will cover all the remediation costs in the event that they walk away, I have no problem with that for American-owned mining companies. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you. Okay, we're now in round number 2. This is going to be focusing on education. This is for all candidates. Our current governor continues to seek ways to delete or dismantle funding for school choice, including homeschooling, charter schools, and private schools. How will you ensure this financial source will always remain available for parents who choose this option? We're going to start with Mark Finchem.
Well, I think so far we've been fairly effective. We, during the period of time that I was in the House of Representatives, we had a friendly governor. Now we have one who is hostile. She is, let's make no mistake, she is beholden to the school teachers union. Hard stop. That is all she cares about. And whether it's inserting transgender ideology or what is it they call it, affirming care, all these things that are not education but indoctrination, I think that we've got an opportunity as a strong Senate and strong House of Representatives to stand in the way. In fact, I think in this last iteration of the budget, there are some things that the legislature got into place that blocked the occupant of the 9th floor's attempts to do a whole bunch of things. Well, it's wash, rinse, repeat. If she's going to try and do an assault on ESAs through an executive order, we'll see you in court, because that's already long-established law, long-established jurisprudence, because there have been so many lawsuits over it to begin with that she would be putting uphill for her. It's not going to happen. But the legislature has to remain vigilant, not allowing any, not even a scintilla of language to go into new law that would interfere with school funding as it is now. We can't go backwards. Now, one of the things that I spoke of earlier was backpack funding. I've had parents say, well, I choose to have my kids in the public schools. I'm glad school choice is working for you. That was the end of that argument in 2020. There was a massive move by the education community to end ESAs. They picked the wrong subject. So, backpack funding, I think we continue to press the envelope. We continue to make sure that every single kid that has the opportunity to file for it gets it. If we don't have them full, we find kids to fill it up.
All right, thank you. Senator Bennett.
One of the very first things that Governor Hobbs said in her State of the State address last year, 2023, her first State of the State address, is that she wanted to repeal the ESA program. Not only did we prevent her from doing so, we also prevented her from putting any limits on its growth. If something is growing, especially something that is based on the choice of parents as to how they want their children educated, we should encourage that, not restrict it. And so we not only kept the budget unlimited as to whatever growth in student count occurred. The money was in the Department of Education to fund it. This year, she said the same thing. One of the things that I did is that I stopped 10 of the 12 bills in the Senate that were proposed by Senator Marsh. She's a public school teacher, nice lady, but she doesn't like competition. She doesn't like ESAs. Of the 12 bills that she introduced, I killed 10 of them by not even putting them on the Senate education agenda to even hear them. 2 of the bills I put on, we talked about one, we took some testimony, defeated it. I voted against it, even though there were some in this county, and maybe not this room, but said that I voted for that bill. That was misinformation. We voted to kill that bill. And the other bill that we heard testimony from the Department of Education. We heard testimony from operators of private and parochial schools that they do meet with parents to discuss the special needs or the unique needs of a special needs child. That was the concern of her bill. We realized that that wasn't necessary either, and that we were not going to put a bunch of rules and regulations on private and parochial schools. We were going to let parents choose where their children go to school.
All right, Steve Zipperman.
Well, the ESA program, as I said before, is a high priority for me. I really think it's important that we maintain it. Adding restrictions to the ESA program, there was some of that happened in order to get this budget through this time around. I'm not sure that those restrictions were good. I need to look at them in a little bit more depth. But what I will tell you is that the funding survived because the Republicans worked together and they did not want the ESA program to be killed like the governor did. So they worked very hard together as a team to make sure that stayed in the budget and that it got passed. Now, it didn't grow. I would have liked to have seen it grow. But, under the circumstances, they were probably lucky. I'm not involved in those negotiations today. I'm a private citizen just like you guys are. But it's very frustrating to be sitting on the sidelines watching somebody else determine whether or not your children are going to have an opportunity to get a fair education. And I think that overall, the changes that were made are probably acceptable. Mainly, they didn't cut the funding to the ESA program, and that was the big fight. So I like working with Republican leadership, and I think that needs to be done more frequently.
All right, very good. Question number 2, we'll start off with Steve Zipperman. Did you? I think everybody did, yes. All right. CRT, or critical race theory, and DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, educational curriculums have become a major topic of concern and may even be considered divisive. Do you believe these curriculums hold any value in the education of our children? Steve Zipperman.
No. There's another program that needs to be included that was left off of that list, and that's social emotional learning. These programs are leftist. They're very bad. They're really bad for our kids. They are divisive. They should not be allowed. And they're not teaching our kids with the time that our school teachers have with the children. They're not teaching them math and English and history and civics and the things that we know will make them better kids, better adults when they get there. But instead, they're brainwashing our kids. It's propaganda, and I don't like it. I think they should be outlawed across the board.
All right, very good. Mark Finchem.
No. So whether it's DEI, SLP, Common Core, no matter what, have you noticed every time they get polling that shows it's unpopular, they don't fix the program, they just change the name. That is Marxism. What we're engaged in right now is a color revolution. Do you know what that is? That scares me. Please look up color revolution. It is the undermining of the Judeo-Christian ethic. And anybody who says that we are not a nation formed under God, Barack Obama, I question their fidelity to our Constitution to begin with. It's very clear that we are. You look at the material in the past that was taught. Now, this came across actually when I was a freshman in the House of Representatives. I was able to work with my colleagues in a very divisive House of Representatives. We had a lot of moderate to left-leaning Republicans who voted for Common Core before I arrived. When I arrived, I said, no. Our constituents want this gone. We got Common Core repeal out of the House over to the Senate in one vote. That's why this is so important. One vote killed the bill to repeal Common Core. Senator Bob Worsley, you can thank the guy. He lives, I'm not sure where he lives now, but that was the vote. Doug Ducey was prepared to veto the bill if it made it to his desk. Think about that. We had two significant leaders who are now subjecting our kids to that. Because what we're seeing in the schools now is a reiteration, continual reiteration of Common Core. But when you have people working together, people who are not necessarily of the same political ilk, you can put a stop to these kinds of things. And that's what we have to do. Thank you.
All right. Senator Bennett.
No. I do not support CRT. We have statutes in place that prohibit the use of CRT in the schools. The trouble is policing 50-some thousand teachers, some of whom want to introduce that into their curriculum. So that's why it's important that people have choice as to where they send their children to schools. Because if something is happening in your school that you don't like, you should have a choice to take your children elsewhere.
All right, very good. All right, question number 3. Do you believe that biological males should be allowed in girls' restroom and sports? We have security ready, right? All right. If yes, why? And if not, what exactly would you do to prevent transgender males from being allowed to do so? We'll start with Senator Bennett.
No, I do not support biological males competing with girls in women's sports or being in their private areas. There's a lot of people that were upset that I didn't support a Senate concurrent resolution to put something on the ballot, and they tried to paint me as though I was opposing bills that were going through the legislature to push back on the transsexual agenda. There were about 7 bills this year that were pushing back on that agenda. I supported all of them, including the 2 bills from Senator John Kavanaugh from Fountain Hills. One had to do with pronouns. If a child at a school wanted to inform the school that they wanted to be called by a pronoun other than their biological sex, you should get permission from the parents. I voted for that bill. Unfortunately, it was vetoed. His second bill was that biological males should not be allowed in the private spaces of girls. I voted for that bill. Unfortunately, it was vetoed. This year he came back and he changed both bills just slightly. He changed the pronoun bill from getting parental permission to informing the parents at least. But the governor said she was going to veto that. The other bill he changed from locker rooms, bathrooms, dressing rooms, and showers to just showers. Boys should not be allowed in girls' showers. On the floor of the Senate, Democrats said they can just put up a shower curtain. That's how crazy some of these people are on this transition. I supported that bill as well. What I voted against is when he took both of last year's bills, not this year's bills, he took last year's bills, combined them into one bill to put on the ballot. That violates the single subject requirement of Arizona's Constitution.
All right, next we have Steve Zipperman.
Well, Mr. Bennett has come up with 3 separate excuses for why he didn't pass that bill. The first excuse was that it was simply too extensive to support and would result in problems that would be difficult for lawmakers to resolve. This is a continuing resolution that you would get to vote on, whether or not you wanted this to be law. The second time, in the Senate Education Committee, he said that, and this is on videotape, that he has family members that would be negatively impacted, and that's why he voted against letting you decide. The third time, he said that it was not appropriate because it's a single subject rule violation. He said that in several forums, and that it wasn't appropriate for that bill because it violated the single rule clause of the Arizona Constitution. So which is it, Mr. Bennett?
All right, Mr. Bennett, you have 1.5 minutes to
It's
respond.
all of them. As I said, I supported these bills as individual bills. What I didn't support was taking 2 bills on 2 different subjects, combining it together, and putting it on the ballot. So I've been clear in why I did what I did, and I would do it again. I'm not going to violate the Arizona Constitution by putting 2 separate issues in one bill and asking the people to vote on it. The Arizona Constitution says that you have to have one subject.
All right, you can respond.
The case law, and I've read it, the case law says that the single subject rule is only on bills that deal with appropriations. There's no appropriations in either one of these matters. So the single subject rule is not implicated, and so it's deceptive to say that it is.
All right, thank you. Mark Finchem.
Thank you. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, I mean no disrespect by sitting down periodically. When I was injured, had a broken back as a firefighter a number of years ago, and I can do about 20 minutes before I have to sit down. So I mean neither of these gentlemen any disrespect or disrespect to you.
All right, we'll start the time now.
Could you reread the question for me?
Yes. Let me reread the question, then we'll start the time. Do you believe that biological males should be allowed in girls' restroom and sports? If yes, why? If not, what exactly would you do to prevent transgender males from being allowed to do so?
Have you noticed that the left always tries to hide things? Their true intent, they don't want to tell parents, they don't want teachers to tell parents, hey, your kids are having a suicidal ideation or a transgender ideation. They want to hide that from parents. Title IX, federal law, came into existence, and this is what the crazy thing about this, okay? National Organization of Women, now, pushed hard to get Title IX in to protect what? The opportunity for women to compete for what? Scholarships. Now, we have the Democrat Party and even some Republicans, especially at the federal level, but a few at the state level, who are pushing for an abrogation of Title IX to say, oh, well, if you want to identify as a woman, even without a change, well, and they, have you noticed they get into these contorted, twisted explanations, excuse me, of their proposed policy change? It's word salad. It doesn't make any sense. Title IX exists for one reason, and that's why I do not support this whole transgender thing that they've created. Title IX is there to protect women's opportunity. They fought for it. They won it. It needs to be protected. And it needs to be protected at the state level as well. Title IX is a very important component in making sure that everybody has equal opportunity. They want to play it as an equity play. It's equal opportunity. Thank you.
All right. All right, question number 4, and I'm going to embellish a little bit here. If you know the history of the public school system, you'll realize that our original founding fathers knew that to have self-governance, you must have an educated populace. They went directly to the Bible, went to Proverbs 1:7, where it says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." So school was originally intended to talk about God, morals from God, and then everything else. We've reversed it. Currently, school was originally, I prefaced it with this. So it was intended on focusing on reading, writing, and arithmetic. Now the focus seems to educate our children on how they should think when it comes to morality and spiritual beliefs. Should our school system be teaching our children anything related to transgender, LGBTQ plus, etc., infinity issues? I just added those. Or should parents be able to raise their children with the same moral and spiritual system they themselves believe in? We're going to start off with Mark Finchem.
Thank you for the question. So, do y'all remember the names Horace Mann and John Dewey? A couple of Marxists out of the Frankfurt School who wanted factory learning. Why would they want that? So that they could push their ideology and move away from the small school. That was what this is about. Now, as we look at what the schools are teaching, you know, there's a great book by David Barton that talks about the separation of church and state, which, by the way, is a misnomer. Justice Rehnquist said it needs to go on the ash heap of history. Interesting that they preach separation of church and state, but they want to shove their religious cult ideology down our kids' throats. Never mind the fact that they can't do math, they can't read, and they can't write. Let's add another one on there. In order to have a society that is functioning, shouldn't we have civics and the understanding of one's own government? You ask the average kid coming out of school today, in fact, not in this room for sure, but you ask the average adult, how many branches of government are there? 9? No. 3. 4 if you want to count the administrative state, which seems to have taken us over, but I jest. The issue that we have here is that we are not teaching our children, we're not bringing them up in the way they should go, so they will not forget and depart from it when they become adults. We got to hand this thing off to who? Somebody who doesn't even know that the legislature is first in the Constitution for a reason? It is the branch of government that is closest to the people. Then comes the executive, and then the judiciary.
All right, thank you. Senator Bennett, would you like me to reread the question?
Yeah, read the question again.
All right.
if you would.
Schools should be focusing on reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Yes.
Now the focus seems to educate our children on how they should think when it comes to morality and spiritual beliefs.
No.
Should our school system be teaching our children anything related to transgender, LGBTQ plus, et cetera, infinity issues? Or should parents be able to raise their children with the same moral and spiritual system they believe in?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Which is why I support not having any limits. We didn't put any limits monetarily on the ESA program, even in this year's budget. If more students show up and request a scholarship, that number, that dollar amount will grow. The average scholarship, by the way, is running at about $7,500 per student. Now, if a student has special needs, that number can go way up. I was just talking to Tom Ward, the director of the ESA program last week, I think it was. The largest scholarship in the ESA system is $42,000 for one student for 1 year. So there can be a pretty wide variation depending on the unique needs of each individual child. Overall, the average is around 75. It bumped up to 9,000 a couple of months ago, but it's hovering around the 7,500. But we didn't put any monetary limit. If more parents request ESA scholarships for their students, they will receive them, and they will, if the Department of Education doesn't have the money in other parts of its budget, it'll have to come back to the legislature for what's called a supplemental appropriation. But I think they have enough money in their budget to actually account for some more increase, and I support that.
All right. Thank you so much. Steve Zipperman.
Well, I have two responses because I was going in a different direction in the last one. First of all, 2 X's means you're a female. You want to compete in female sports, you better have 2 X chromosomes. That's biology. With respect to parents being able to control the education of their children with respect to spirituality and morality, the Founding Fathers all learned how to read by sitting down with their mom over the Bible. That's how they learned how to read, and all of the Founding Fathers believed in God. They were godly men, and we need to get closer to that. We need to get back to that design. Parents should be able to control morality and spiritual beliefs between the parents, their religious leaders, and their children. And it should get back to that. And the ESA program allows parents to have more control over those matters. And I'm strongly in favor of that.
All right, very good. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're now in round 3. We call this the speed round. So what I'm going to do is I'll ask questions for each one of them, and just to make it easier, we'll start with Senator Bennett, Mark Finchem, and then Steve Zipperman, and we'll just go accordingly. There may be a preface to the actual question, but we'll give that to you as well. All right, here we go. Question number 1. Recently, the Maricopa County Republican Committee, EGC, unanimously approved a platform of fundamental goals, objectives, and principles for candidates seeking support and consideration from the MCRC EGC, referred to as the Victory Platform 2024. Now, these candidates must approve all the following 5 items. We will now ask the candidates this. Senator Bennett, are you 100% MAGA, yes or no?
Yes.
Mr. Finchem?
I'm Trump endorsed, yeah.
Mr. Zipperman?
I'm a veteran. MAGA means make America great again. Yes.
All right. Number 2. Senator, are you 100% pro-Trump?
Yes.
Mark? Is this a
Yes.
tough one
Yes.
for you?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
All right, Steve?
I'm a delegate to the national committee that's going to be meeting in Milwaukee. I will be casting a vote for President Trump. Yes.
All right. Number 3, 100% pro-life. Senator Bennett?
Yes, I have a 100% pro-life rating for my now 10 years in the legislature.
All right. Mark?
Ditto.
All right. Steve?
Yes, and my wife and I carried the banner at the front of the Right to Life March. It was 2 years ago, I guess. But yes, I'm firmly 100% pro-life.
All right. Number 4, are you willing to follow all Arizona and U.S. constitutional laws, promote and defend individual rights, liberties, and freedoms, and stand for limited government and fiscal responsibilities? Yes or no?
Yes.
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 All right. And the last one, acknowledge that there was maladministration with the process and method of our elections. Yes or no?
Yes, our elections are never perfect. I do not believe that the errors that were made in the 2020 and 22 elections in Arizona changed the outcome of those elections. But I believe that
All right, hold it down. Hold
I believe that Republicans showed great courage.
This is the speed round. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Mark.
Yes, and we have the receipts of illegal activity.
All right, Steve.
We need to do away with the machines. They'd make great boat anchors instead of tabulators. There were a lot of errors. There were a lot of errors in the 2020 and 2022 elections. A lot of places where there were problems.
Is that a yes?
Some of them were intentional, yes.
All right, good. All right, so if a similar motion like this for endorsement is drafted in Yavapai County, are you willing to abide by it? Yes or no? Senator Bennett?
Yes.
All right, Mark Finchem?
Similar or exactly the same?
Exactly the same.
Exactly the same? Yes.
All right, Steve?
We agreed to each of the terms that you discussed? Yes.
All right, very good. So Yavapai County, if you heard that, let's do that as well. All right, question number 2. We have seen lawsuit after lawsuit in the 2020 and 2022 elections. Do you believe that both of those elections, 2020 and 22, were legally, fairly, and accurately conducted? Senator Bennett.
Yes, they were not perfect, but they represented the choice of Arizonans in those elections.
All right, Mark Finchem?
No, they were not, and we have the receipts. That's why we went to the U.S. Court of Appeals.
All right, Steve Zipperman?
No, those elections were not clean.
All right. Number 3, as a legislator, do you intend to reduce taxes for Arizona citizens and businesses? Senator Bennett?
Yes, when I was Senate President with Janet Napolitano, liberal Democrat, we did the largest tax cut. I got her to sign the largest tax cut in the history of the state at that time. So I can do it with Democrats even, but I would also support cutting taxes
All right,
almost any time.
Mark Finchem?
Yes, we were an eyelash away from ending the income tax in the state of Arizona. Governor Ducey didn't get it across the finish line. We had tried to. I'll bring that up again.
All right, Steve?
I'm a small businessman, retired. Reduce taxes to individuals and businesses? Absolutely, along with cutting regulations that bind those companies, those small companies that can't make it because they're dealing with so many regulations.
All right. Last question in the speed round. Recently, the states of Texas and Montana have filed a lawsuit against the Department of HHS regarding a change to Section 1557 of the Obama Affordable Care Act. They argue that this forces taxpayers to pay for controversial drugs and experimental surgeries for people seeking gender transition, which inflict permanent harm. Do you believe the taxpayers of Arizona should be held financially responsible for those individuals seeking such procedures and medications?
No.
All right.
No.
No.
All right. Very good. Now we can all take a breath. That was the speed round. All right. Everybody breathe in and breathe out. All right. There you go. All right. We're in round number 4. This is going to be different questions for each candidate, and this is on voting records. We're going to start off with Mr. Mark Finchem. In 2016, House Bill 2456 was introduced to have Arizona withdraw from the Electoral College. The Electoral College is a long-standing safeguard against extreme high population states such as New York and California controlling elections. Please explain your vote in favor of Arizona withdrawing from the Electoral College.
So for starters, the question is a misrepresentation of the legislation. It was not to withdraw from the Electoral College at all. Anybody who asserts that is sadly misinformed. I think it's kind of pathetic that we got to go that far back into a voting record of something that I fought for 9 years against. That's misinformation by omission. My voting record at the time, y'all remember Michael Steele? RNC chair, rolls into town with Constantine Carrard. He just happens to be the campaign manager for at least one of the candidates up here in LD1. They were explaining that in order to save the Constitution, the states had to bind together in advance their electoral college votes. That is not an abrogation of the electoral college, as the question would lead you to believe. Now, yes, I voted for it, but once I found out that it was a bad vote, I fought against it for 9 years. If I'm your senator, I will see to it that that doesn't even make it into a referral to the ballot. It's just as bad, if not worse, as ranked choice voting. By the way, they've changed the name, so decline to sign if you're hit with one of these petitions.
All right, very good. If anybody wants to review that, we do have that here available too. All right, Mr. Bennett. Senate Concurrent Resolution SCR 1013 would have eliminated a wide range of transgender inclusive practices in our schools, including pronoun use, using the same bathrooms as boys and girls, and other parental concerns. You voted yes on Senate Bills 1166 and 1182, but then voted no on SCR 1013, stating it was a conflated bill, that each bill sent to the voters needed to be a single issue bill. Please explain what a yes on Senate Bills 1166 and 1182 and a no vote on SCR 1013 means.
As I alluded to earlier, I supported the bill that said if a child is asking to be called by a pronoun other than their biological sex, the school should get permission from the parents. I also voted yes when that was vetoed and Senator Kavanaugh changed it to at least inform the parents. So I voted yes on both of those bills. Also voted yes on the bill that he had last year, which said biological males should not be in girls' locker rooms, showers, dressing rooms, and there was a fourth one I don't recall right now. So I supported that. That was vetoed. I supported the bill again this year when he narrowed it to just showers only. So I voted yes on all four of those bills. But when he then took last year's version of the bills, combined them together, I voted no, as I explained before, because it violates the single subject requirement, which is not limited to just appropriation items, by the way, Mr. Zipperman. It violated the single subject rule, and I voted against it.
All right, since your name was brought up, would you like to rebut that?
I would. With respect to that bill, as was indicated before, there have been a lot of different explanations for why that happened. But in a forum about this size, Mr. Bennett said he didn't want it to go to the people. It was one of the concurrent resolutions that was killed by Mr. Bennett. His one vote killed that bill because we only have a one-vote majority in the Senate. And basically, he didn't think the people were competent to make that decision. And I don't believe that. I think the people are very smart and very capable of doing it. I'd also like to rebut Mr. Finchem's statement. He co-sponsored HB 2456. I have a copy of it here. Mr. Michaels has a copy as well. I encourage you after this is over to take a look at it. The bill's name is amending Title 16 Arizona Revised Statutes by adding Chapter 9 relating to the agreement among the states to elect the president by national popular vote. California has 39.5 million people. Arizona has 7.5 million people. By voting for this, which Mr. Finchem did when he was in the House, what he did is he disenfranchised Arizona voters who would have been able to vote in the presidential election. But their vote will be meaningless because of the disparity in the numbers. And that's why the Founding Fathers gave us the Electoral College, so that small states have a voice in their government.
All right, now, since you did bring up Mark Finchem, I'm going to have him do it, and then we're going to come back to you for the last question on that last one. Go ahead.
Yes, the misrepresentation here is pathetic. That's not what the bill did. It operated as though it would pool votes of the states. Mr. Zipperman has advocated that it disenfranchised people. It did nothing of the sort because it didn't pass. It was killed. It was a vote that should not have ever been brought forward. Now, when the chairman of the RNC comes in and says, we have to do this, we are desperate, okay? I'm a freshman. That's 10 years ago. One bad vote. So you got to go back 10 years to find something in my voting history that you don't like? That's pathetic.
Okay,
That
thank you.
bill did pass.
Okay, now
Passed
we're
the House.
violating the rules
All right,
of the
yeah,
engagement.
Hang on. Okay.
But-
Hang on. All right. So we're finished on the rebuttal back and forth. So, Mr. Zipperman, since you do not have a current voting record to reference, what could or should have been done differently for either one of the ones that either Senator Bennett or Mark Finchem referred to? You have 2 minutes.
Well, HB 2456 was passed by the House. The Senate killed it, and that's why it isn't law. But Mr. Finchem's House did indeed pass it. I have a copy of the voting records, and I have a copy of the bill right here. You're welcome to take a look when this is over.
All right. Since you were brought up, you can have another minute and a half.
Okay, again, misrepresentation. I said the bill didn't pass. If he wants to nitpick about it passed out of the House but didn't pass out of the bill did not pass. Of course, if he was in the legislature and knew process, he probably would understand the difference.
Okay. All right. Now we're all going to take a breath. We are in the final round. The final round. All right. Border security and accountability. There is no doubt our state border is being overrun by illegal immigration, an overwhelming supply of deadly fentanyl, human trafficking, not to mention the increase of crime, and financial detriment to our economy, which accompanies these open border policies. The current PINO, that's president in name only, and the governor are doing little to protect our state and citizenry with their open border policies. A vast majority of Arizonans believe it is imperative our state legislators pass laws which protect our rights, liberties, and freedoms. As our elected representative, what are your detailed plans to address this? Steve Zipperman.
First off, the Arizona legislature, because the governor won't act, the legislature needs to bring a suit, State of Arizona versus United States of America, under Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution. If we are being invaded, Article 4, Section 4 says that the United States of America has a duty to defend the state of Arizona. I can't bring the suit myself, although I found a lawyer who would do it for the legislature. I've brought this to the President of the Senate, and because he has other priorities, he has other ideas, he wasn't willing to do anything with it. I have a lawyer willing to file the lawsuit because it is a slam dunk. And after 30 years of practicing law, I recognize one when I see it. I also found somebody that was willing to finance it so that it wouldn't cost the taxpayers of Arizona 10 cents. So the bottom line, I got a lawyer willing to file the suit. I have a strong case, and the President of the Senate won't do it, and of course, our Democrat governor won't do it. So we, the people, kind of were stuck because the people that we elected. Be careful about who you vet and who you elect as your representatives in government, because it will come back to hurt you if you make the wrong choice.
All right. Senator Bennett.
The border and helping to secure it was our top priority as a Republican caucus in the Senate this year. We were very pleased when Governor Hobbs said, quote, in her State of the State address this year, "We cannot move forward without first addressing Washington's ongoing failure to secure our southern border." And a couple seconds later, she expressed support for, quote, "our neighbors, sheriffs, small business owners, and local law enforcement near the border who work every day to offer solutions where the federal government has failed." So the first bill we put on her desk this year was Senator Janae Shamp's 1231. Creates a state crime of entering Arizona illegally directly from a foreign nation. There's only one of those, that's Mexico. But we have people from 160 plus nations entering every day. So we put this bill on her desk, which would make it a state crime, so that local law enforcement, sheriff deputies, local police officers, highway patrol, anyone on the border could arrest under a state law rather than trying to do something under a federal law that is not being enforced by the federal government. The governor vetoed that, so we did. We put House Concurrent Resolution 2060 together. It passed. I got some amendments on the bill to make sure that it was constitutional. They had written it so that it would have applied this new state law retroactively, which is not constitutional. That's ex post facto. Both the U.S. and the Arizona constitutions prohibit that. So I got some amendments on there to be clear that it's only prospective, and it passed the House and the Senate and will go to the voters this November. I believe the voters, most Republicans, many independents, and even some Democrats will pass that, and it will become state law.
All right, thank you. And Mark?
Pressure, pressure, pressure. We have pressure that is now coming from the people in a referral to the ballot. Please, I beg you, make sure that you vote yes on that referral. If you don't vote on the other referrals, I'm okay with that. This one is a gotta have. It will empower our sheriffs. Now, the next piece of that is that we need to make sure that if they need emergency funding, they've got it. Because when you take on an additional responsibility in the law enforcement world, a new law, you will have some kind of additional financial exposure. Here in Yavapai County, in fact, there's folks that say, well, you know, we're so far from the border. I got news for you. Every county is a border county now. Whether they bus you in, they drive you in, they fly you in, or walk you in. It's a long walk, yes, but they are busing people in. Go out onto Facebook. They're paying kids to drive to Mexico, pick up a load of illegals, come across with their friends, and drive them to points north. Perhaps the biggest tool that we've got now is the referral to the ballot that empowers sheriffs. The next piece of that puzzle will be the appropriation for next year to see to it that whatever we have in they call it the rainy day fund. I hate that name. It's an emergency contingency fund. I think right now we're kind of in an emergency. Katie Hobbs said when she was running for governor, I have a plan. Now it'd be a really good time to tell us what that plan is, Katie. Because so far you haven't done a bloody damn thing. So holding the governor accountable in the courts and in the court of public opinion, that is where we have to be. That is where we have to litigate this, not just in court, but on the streets, in public square, on social media, everywhere.
All right, thank you so much. Next question. Election integrity and chain of custody on all ballots is a major concern, not only here in Arizona, but countrywide. HCR 2032 would have required individual counties in Arizona to go back to the long-established method of precinct voting with smaller precincts, all in lieu of voting centers. Mr. Bennett, we're going to start with you. You voted against this bill. Please explain.
This was an attempt to rein in some problems, primarily in Maricopa County. Unfortunately, it would not have done what it tried to do in Maricopa County, and it would have messed up a bunch of other counties, including Yavapai. Yavapai County uses voting centers just fine, as do many other counties. In Maricopa County, if you required the precincts to be no more than 1,000 each, Maricopa County would need 2,500 voting locations on Election Day. They have a hard time finding about 240 right now. 80+ % of Arizona voters vote by mail. What we need to do is tighten up the chain of custody on all ballots, including mail-in ballots. We also tightened up per a bill that the governor did sign, the signature verification requirements so that there's more standardization for the counties that do that. Some counties do it better than others. Maricopa County has a lot of progress to make, but I think they will make that under the law that we passed and Governor Hobbs signed. So I do not support, when we last voted at the precinct-only level, Maricopa County had over 100,000 provisional ballots for people going to the wrong places. Under voting centers, that has been reduced to about 2,000. And the problems that we need to fix, ballot chain of custody, verifying that the machines have tabulated the ballots correctly, more transparency. I have proposed, for example, that the county should release the ballot images and the cast vote record so that anyone who wants to verify 1 or 100 or all of the ballots can do so. Or we can do like Maryland, which uses a separate system to tabulate the ballots after each county did their tabulation.
All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Finchem, please explain where you stand on this issue.
Paper ballots, hand counting at the precinct level on election day. Hard stop. I was appalled in the 2020 election and the 2022 election when I lived in Tucson. My ballot went into a gray painted metal box. Anybody see a problem with that? That's a lack of transparency. Why couldn't it be clear Lexan so we wouldn't know, I don't know, that there wasn't something already in there? By the way, I don't trust government any further than I can throw it. Paper ballots counted by hand at the precinct level on election day. This advance notice of who's turned in their ballots that's the playground of Satan. Because when you know that there's a group that hasn't, that group can be co-opted. Now, as for machines, I agree with Mr. Zipperman, they need to be boat anchors. In fact, the nation of Norway went back to hand counting of paper ballots on election day, and they didn't have a bit of a problem. 6 million people. I'm thinking Maricopa County could do the same thing. But this goes back to a bigger problem that we have. The legislature and even the county seem to think, Maricopa being the big gorilla, they seem to think that one size fits all. How about we get back to local control? In fact, we are in court right now. I'm the executive director of the Election Fairness Institute. We're in court right now suing Chris Mays for threatening the Mojave County supervisors with criminal prosecution for doing something that is legal under Arizona law, and that is making a choice to or not to use a machine. She led them to believe that they were facing prison time, and that is a violation of Section 1983 of the Civil Rights Code.
All right, thank you. Steve, please explain where you stand on this issue.
The country of France has 9 times more voters. They were able to do hand count of paper ballots the same day. Maricopa County isn't that big. It's larger than we are. Everything's large compared to Yavapai County, basically. But I don't think that hand counting, I think that hand counting is the solution to the problem. The fact that we don't trust government, I don't trust government either. The founding fathers didn't trust the government that they were putting together. That's why they gave us a Constitution. The purpose of the Constitution is to protect our rights against our government taking them away from us. They knew, and they were very prescient. They understood what we were going to face, and we do today. Even though they gave us those protections, God gave us rights, not government. And because God gave them to us, government shouldn't be able to take them away from us. But voting centers are not what we need. When I was a kid, my mom worked the polls. They voted until 7 o'clock at night. My mom was late coming back. Hey, Dad, why isn't Mom home yet? Well, because they have to count the ballots. For 100 years, hand counting ballots in this state was perfectly acceptable. All of a sudden, we've traded expediency for accuracy. I'm not happy with the trade. I think we need to go back to hand counts, same day, on election day. And if you did that, the money to pay for all this and all these workers that would be working in the precincts, it would come from not sending money to China for the machines, not sending money to China for the software, and not mailing out over millions of ballots to God knows where so that our election results would be corrupted. I think we need to get away from the machines.
If you've never had a chance, pick up the Federalist Papers. I think in 51 it talks exactly what Steve and Mark were talking about. All right, so just a couple more questions here. These are for the individual as well. So personal integrity is just as important as election integrity. At the recent Yavapai GOP speaking engagement, Mr. Zipperman, Steve, you led the audience to believe perhaps Mr. Finchem and Mr. Bennett, Senator Bennett, are writing big checks to acquire their endorsements. Steve, what evidence do you have to support that reference?
There's an article. I've got a copy of it right here. It was published by Forbes magazine, which is a neutral. They have never taken political sides in anything. And the article clearly states that Mr. Finchem spent $53,000 at Mar-a-Lago in 2022, and he was endorsed by President Trump. What a coincidence. There's also a letter that was written by the lady. Her name is Susie. I don't remember her last name. She works for President Trump. And it says, if you have a picture of you with President Trump and you publish it, that you have to pay 5% of all the money that you raise. Now, I'm not privileged to understand the communications between the parties, but I'm very suspicious that money's changing hands for those endorsements. Part of the reason is people that get the endorsements don't win. It doesn't mean that much. So that's my position. And if you want to see the article, I've got a copy of it here.
All right, Mark, you may rebut.
Fake news. So Mr. Zipperman has misrepresented again reality. We had a fundraiser there that I paid for through the campaign with donations to individuals who were supporting me. That went to pay for food, site prep, site rental, all of the things that go into you're seeing a small example of it here. There's overhead. You got power, you got the building, you got the help, all of that. To make the claim that I paid for an endorsement is absolutely false. Tantamount to slander and libel. He's got no proof whatsoever except an article in Forbes, who, by the way, also has no proof. It's a financial report on what we spent. Now, if you'd like to see the details of it, I'd be happy to provide that for you because I still have the same campaign finance manager. I would not stoop myself so low as to pay anybody for an endorsement. Nobody. That's one of the reasons President Trump, three of the most honorable men that I've ever met in my life, by the way, President Trump, Lieutenant General Mike Flynn, and Tom Homan, former ICE director. I didn't pay anybody a damn dime for that. The reason that they looked at me, and they looked at the other two candidates, by the way, Mr. Bennett was in favor of Mr. DeSantis. Okay, I understand that. Mr. Zipperman, so low on the totem pole as far as polling, barely is a blip. The question becomes, where did we get the endorsements? Those endorsements came hard won. Interviews, vetting, all of the things that go into background investigation. And I'm out of time.
All right, any rebuttal on either side?
Well, you mentioned, Ray, that I was accused by him of the same thing. I've never paid any organization for an endorsement, but I am pleased that I've been endorsed by the Arizona Police Association, the largest police association in the state, the Professional Firefighters of Arizona, the Arizona Chamber of Commerce, the Arizona Technology Council, the Arizona Multi-Housing Association, I received the Senator of the Year Award from the Arizona County School Superintendents, Champion Award from the Arizona League of Cities and Towns for respecting local control, Champion Award from the Arizona Association of Economic Development. So I'm pleased to have received endorsements. I just got notified yesterday that I was one of 10 Republican state senators, actually 10 of all 30 state senators, that got a 100% rating by the Arizona Citizens Defense League, which is focused on Second Amendment. Of all the bills they tracked, I voted in support of our Second Amendment rights on every one of them.
Okay. All right, Mr. Finchem, in a recent video interview with the Yavapai chapter of AZRA, you indicated it was members of the Senate that asked you to run for the Senate seat for LD1 in 2024. During that video interview, you would not disclose any of those individuals. What was their reason for asking you to run in opposition to Senator Bennett or Steve Zipperman? And if you would like to disclose who they are, we'd be happy to hear that as well.
Yeah, I'll not disclose who they are because they asked me to. And, you know, the political environment is one that is built on trust. Your yes is your yes and your no is your no. The reason that they asked me to run, and it wasn't just the Senate, there were members in the House as well, because they weren't satisfied with the candidates that are currently in the election that they went through. We went through an election 2 years ago, and the mix just was not, it was very unsettling to them. And they said, we want to have somebody who's a proven conservative that's going to stand with the caucus, that we know where your record is at. You've got one of the strongest conservative voting records ever during that 8 years that I was in the House of Representatives. And I would add that I've also been endorsed by the state AZRA organization. I can guarantee you that wasn't paid for either.
All right, very good. All right, and last, Mr. Bennett, Senator Bennett, excuse me, according to your budget request in 2023, there was a line item for $2.3 million allocated to the Secretary of State's office, Adrian Fontes. As an elected representative of the voters of Yavapai County, how do you justify that those funds were not spent in Yavapai County for the benefit of Yavapai County voters?
I am chair of the Education Committee, so some of my requests of my $30 million went to statewide programs for adult education and career and technical education for students all over the state. I also have brought $6.3 million to the town of Clarkdale for a bridge that they needed. But the Secretary of State had informed me that the previous secretary, now governor, or Gino, is that it? The previous Secretary of State had filled several key positions in the state elections department with interns. And Mr. Fontes believed, as I believed when I was the secretary many years ago, that those key positions should not be filled by interns. They should be filled by qualified, full-time employees. And he convinced me that $2.3 million is what it took to do that. So I saw it as correcting a mistake of Katie Hobbs when she was Secretary of State, and I agreed to help get him the monies that he needed to fill those positions with full-time qualified employees instead of interns.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so now you will all have 2 minutes each for a closing statement. And we can start off with Senator Bennett.
Well, thank you all for coming here tonight. If you don't know, I have lived in this county most of my life. I was born in Tucson when my folks were going to the University of Arizona, but we moved back here when I was 3, and I've essentially been here ever since, except for 2 years I lived in Japan when I was a Christian missionary, and for 8 years I lived in the Phoenix area because the Arizona Constitution requires our statewide elected officials to live in Maricopa County. Otherwise, I am here. I made the little point about Senator Bennett because the voters of this district have elected me 5 times to represent them in the Senate. Some of those times was with a Republican governor. My first 4 years was with Jane Hull. second 4 years, I was in the Senate. I was president of the Senate with Janet Napolitano. And yet, as I described earlier, we got the largest tax cut in the history of the state of Arizona, passed and signed by a Democrat governor. Arizona's income tax used to be 9%. Fife Simon had got it from 9 to 7. I and the legislators with me got Janet Napolitano to sign a bill that got it from 7 to 4.9. And Governor Ducey, last year or 2 years ago, got it from 4.9 to 2.5. I also was responsible for getting her to sign the elimination of the state property tax that used to help fund a bunch of things, but K-12, because we had enough money elsewhere. But at the same time we got the largest tax cut in the history of the state, we also had the largest increase of funds for the K-12 system than any other time in the history of the state. So I'm going to continue to fight for the residents of this district. They know me, you know me, this is my hometown, and I'm going to fight for you, and I thank you for being here tonight.
That's Senator Bennett. Thank you. All right, Mark Finchem, 2 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking the time out. This is the best of the political process. When you show up and you listen to people duke it out. But I will say this. I think it's a sad day when misrepresentation rules the roost. You're here to hear about our public policy ideas. You're not here to hear about misrepresentations through omission. You're not here to hear from people that seem intent upon telling a story, spinning a yarn that something that might be, but they have no fact. For 21 years, I served in West Michigan in the role of a Department of Public Safety officer. First as a firefighter, I was severely injured, level 3 paramedic. Throughout that entire career, I maintained that status. 18 years as a law enforcement officer. I know the function of law. I understand how law is constructed, particularly in the criminal world. What we have right now is an existential threat, and I don't use that word lightly, an existential threat to the survival of this nation. Because individuals who have decided that personal gain is more important to them than acting out Exodus 18:21. Choose from among you godly men disinterested in personal gain to lead the thousands, the hundreds, the 50s, and the 10s. When we have individuals in office who are willing to spend ungodly amounts of money for a $24,000 a year job, you better ask yourself the question, what's their motive? What's their motive? And when you try to impugn someone with half facts, with misrepresentations, I think that is the worst of politics. And frankly, I'm not going there. My name is Mark Finchem. I am endorsed by President Donald Trump, General Flynn, and Tom Homan, along with the Arizona Republican Assembly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Mark Finchem. And last but not least, Steve Zipperman, 2 minutes.
Okay, is this one working? Yeah. What differentiates me from my opponents? First of all, honesty and integrity are very important to me. I was asked a direct question. I have evidence. That's the evidence that I presented to you today. It's legitimate. I practiced law for just under 30 years. I understand legislative words. I promise, it's my commitment to everyone in this room and everyone outside of this room. I will read the bills before I vote on them, which has not been the history. I understand the language better than either of my opponents based on my experience as a practicing lawyer. I know how the law is used by attorneys in the real world. I know how judges respond to written statutes. I've dealt with this personally for just under 30 years, representing people just like you. To me, the people come first. That's very important. Declaration of Independence states all power of government is derived from consent of the governed. That puts you in charge, not the elected official. I will serve the people who elect me. I don't take lobbyist money, unlike my opponents. My decisions on bills can't be bought. I don't owe any political favors to anyone. I'm not a professional politician looking for my next government job. I'm not doing this for the money. The $24,000 is a joke. I'm doing this to serve the people. Every occupation I've had since I was 17 years of age was service to the people. It's very important. That's what this job is supposed to be about. It's not supposed to be about the money. I've never been sanctioned or disciplined by any court or any judge, ever. I also have a real estate license since 1983, a broker's license. I've never been sanctioned or investigated or disciplined there either. I'm a populist, a person who strives to appeal to ordinary people who feel their concerns are disregarded by established elite groups.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause. Senator Ken Bennett, Representative Mark Finchem, Steve Zipperman. I'm sure they'll be happy to stick around, answer any questions for you. We thank you all for coming. Luke, did you want to wrap things up? All right. Well, thank you so much for coming. Please drive safe. Stick around. Meet somebody that you haven't met yet. We are all in this together. We thank you again so much for coming tonight on behalf of Yavapai County, AZRA, and everybody here tonight. Thank you so much. Please drive safe. We'll see you again real soon.